On the Scene video coverage of AHA 2012 is supported by Pradaxa.
Welcome back to the final day on the Scene here at AHA 2012. I'm joined by two colleagues and friends, Deepak Bhatt and Jessica Mega, both of Timmy Group and from Boston. We have a final set of studies here, first of which was one of the interesting CABBAGE studies looking at whether mitral valve annuloplasty would be helpful in improving symptoms in patients with functional MR seen on echo. This is an interesting study, small but interesting look. What did you think of the study?
Well, I thought the results were quite provocative. Basically, patients randomized to CABBAGE plus mitral valve annuloplasty versus CABBAGE alone had significant improvements in functional capacity, in symptoms, in objective measures of their functional capacity. So I think the results really confirm what many surgeons believe. I would point out that the trial was modest in size, only a little over 70 patients. And there were some signals of things going in the wrong way, statistically significantly higher length of hospital stay, higher intubation time, more transfusion, and numerically more, though absolutely not powered for it, numerically more adverse events as well.
What did you think? There's a balance of seemingly good symptoms, but some troubles in the OR and soon thereafter.
Right, so the study was stopped prematurely or stopped early because it did look like there were some benefits. And I think these are things that patients care about. They care about feeling better. So we need to pay attention to that. But as we've heard, there are some signals, longer length of stay, concerning transfusions. So clinical outcomes will be important before we absolutely change our practice.
Okay, so with that, I think some interesting new data. A second study here was a registry, but from a part of the world we're not used to seeing in the Gulf region, and looking at the growing epidemic of atrial fibrillation. Do you want to summarize a little bit, Deepak?
Sure. Well, as you know, I'm a big believer in registries, and we've done a lot of work together with AHA and ACC and REACH with registries. What I think this registry's nicely done is examine patients in the Middle East. And that's important. A lot of research has come out of the Western world, but they've examined now the atrial fibrillation patients in the Middle East. And what they found was that these patients were relatively young, quite undertreated, and had pretty high rates of adverse clinical outcomes. So a bad combination.
I think one thing we always look at is the amount of anticoagulation. How did this stack up in the Gulf region versus elsewhere?
Right, so it looked as if there really was a problem in terms of undertreatment. And I would say we think about treatment in general, we think about time in therapeutic range, but if we're not on drug, we're not going to be in therapeutic range. And I think it was really a call to action. These are young patients, presumably with reasonable bleeding profiles. They really should be treated.
Yeah, so another number, about 50% on anticoagulation and 50% not.
And you can't even say, oh, they're young, don't worry about them, because in fact they had very high rates of adverse events. So it wasn't that they shouldn't have been treated. In fact, they definitely should have been treated.
Yeah. So I think a terrific eye-opener to that we really do need to try and do better in atrial fibrillation. So stay tuned for other trials that are coming out from the last day here at AHA 2012, and for the total impact of this meeting was a pretty big one. A lot of trials overall.